Good morning. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you for asking me to share my experiences and to learn a lot today as well. I'm really looking forward to this day. Let me briefly introduce myself. I worked for the VRT radio, the Belgian radio station. I was a journalist, but in 2009, I was infected with a bacteria. I was really ill. So I got a bacterial infection. I had less than 5% chance of surviving, according to the doctors, because my organs were breaking down. I was in a sepsis, and I had to take so many medications that I didn't know, or that they didn't know, what the consequences would be. Physical consequences, mental consequences. The situation was very unclear. And both of my lower legs needed to be amputated. My right hand was also affected by the infection. It needed to be reconstructed partly. And in that year, 2009, I had pneumonia, and I had the diagnosis of a primary immune disorder, and that wasn't the cause of the sepsis and the infection, but it speeded things up. The process was accelerated by that PID. I wrote down my whole story in a book, My Life on Stilts, it's called, and well, from the one day to the other, I was disabled, and I looked at the world in a completely different way. My husband and I started to travel then. We were travelers before I was disabled, but we thought that we didn't want to give up on that travel, on our travels, and that is why we decided to visit a city. But before we could travel, I had a long period of revalidation, of course. I had to learn to walk again with two lower leg prostheses, and I arrived in a world full of new terms, new emotions. You feel all kinds of things when you walk with a prosthesis, and you're not always sure if you're feeling the right thing. You feel an awful pressure as well, and that's normal, but it shouldn't be painful, because that might lead to wounds then, and then you might end up in a wheelchair. And that is why I sometimes had the feeling that I was a line dancer. If it went well, I could walk, but before I knew it, I had an injury on my leg, and then I had to be in the wheelchair for a while. And well, regarding accessibility and inclusion, I was at a completely different level. When I could walk, I was seen through different eyes than when I was in a wheelchair. My hand was operated on, was reconstructed. It was an operation of 9 hours, but it allowed me to use my right hand again. I could write again. I could cut vegetables again. And people often have the perception when they see me, everything is solved. The problems are gone. They see me walking and they say, well, you can walk again, so that's good. But not everything is okay yet, and it's never solved. It starts when you wake up. Many of you wake up, jump out of bed, and start their day. If I do that, I will have a lot of pain. When I wake up, I can't jump out of the bed. So as soon as I open my eyes, I am confronted with my disabilities, with my limitations, and with the challenges that come with it. But, okay, traveling. My husband and I started traveling again when I had my amputations. About 1 year after the infection and the amputation, we traveled. I challenge you to try and find out where we went to, which city we visited. You can see me here on the stairs with the walking stick. It's a building. The upper level you can see. Anybody has an idea? Which city we visited? Indeed, Barcelona. We just wanted to go to Barcelona, and we said to one another, we will see what we can do there and what's possible. And we were positively surprised because Barcelona is very accessible. And especially the first time we went to Barcelona, we stayed in the old town, in the city center. We also had a hotel in the city center. And we were able to move very conveniently there in the inner city, even from the wheelchair. And if we walked on the dike, for example, there was a path for people in wheelchairs, for mums with pushchairs and so on. And that allowed us, well, thanks to the lift that was installed there, we could visit the Villa Gaudi, for example. I was told that Barcelona was made so accessible because the Olympics and the Paralympics were organized there in '92. I hope we are not going to wait in Belgium until we have the Paralympics to focus more on accessibility, although we are on the right track. Well, if you travel with as a person with disabilities, you need to prepare your trips, of course. Before 2009, we just took the plane, by matter of speaking, and then we saw what we were going to do and how we were going to do it right there. But that's not possible anymore. I often call it slow traveling. You think about your trips in advance, you prepare, you think in advance, what do I want to see, what do I want to do? And Barcelona was a very good example for me. The first time we wanted to see the inner city, for example, mainly. And then after that, 4 years after that, we went back. And then we wanted to see the buildings outside of the city, the Villa of Gaudi and so on. And we always try to stay in an accommodation that is close to the sites that we want to see. And that is convenient, so you don't have to cover that many distances. And it allows you to really save your energy for the visits in itself. Instead of having to use it to cover those distances. And we really want to experience something, we as people with disabilities, rather than checking off a to-do list or a must-see list. No, just being able to be somewhere, to experience the atmosphere, to smell the sea, to feel the sea. Just to be there, that's much more important than to check everything off of your list. That intensity has changed. And one of these other city trips that we did later on was Firenze. We ended up on a roof terrace. We had a glass of wine. We enjoyed the beautiful surroundings there. And that's all you need, really. I remember in Florence, in Firenze, we were in a coffee bar along the water. And there was a street musician who started playing music. And for me, that was a very emotional moment. The music, the fact that we were there, that we could be there after everything that had happened, that was just a beautiful moment for me. I was thankful for that. Last year, we, a group of people with several disabilities, different disabilities, were invited by Tourism Flanders to do a road trip in Bruges and to the coast. And we wanted to find out how accessible Flanders is, how easy or how challenging is it to travel here. And we started at the concert building, the Concertgebouw in Bruges. And that gave us a very good feeling right from the beginning. We immediately felt the atmosphere, the open atmosphere. We had an open area, and it seems like it's all one unit, and everything is open and accessible. And we took the experience parcours there, and we saw from the beginning onwards, from people at the reception already, that everything was very open and made very accessible for people with disabilities. People said it to us as well. Please give us feedback. For example, at the beginning of the building, there was a step that was slightly inclining, and people sometimes tripped over that step. So we reported that. We gave feedback on that, and they appreciated that very much. We did a very beautiful walk there, and you see that they have thought very consciously about accessibility. For example, there was an extra room for people in wheelchairs to attend shows and presentations. We also gave as a tip that maybe more chairs could be provided so people would have more leg space because in old theaters there isn't much space for people when you sit down. But if you need more space around the legs, for example, if you have a prosthesis, that's a challenge. In the concert building, there's also a sound art collection that you can participate in from a wheelchair. There's also a tactile chair there, and via vibrations you can really feel how music sounds. So that was a very positive experience to us. And even though we have reduced mobility, we got to the 7th floor, the roof floor. And that's not always easy in buildings here in Flanders. And there, one of the participants could even play the clocks in the tower. And the visit to the concert building was the starting point of our walk. And we used the brochure Bruges Accessible for Everybody for that walk. It's a walk that has been designed in order to experience the inner city of Bruges as much as possible. The narrow streets are avoided as much as possible, and if there are more difficult parts, then that is mentioned in the brochure. So you can decide yourself, that might be too difficult for me. And we visited the Church of the Holy Lady in Bruges, the Onze Lieve Vrouwenkerk, and we looked at the crypts there. There's a replica of the Madonna with a Child by Michelangelo as well. And during our visit to that church, it was already very clear how important that chain of accessibility is, because you might be able to get in a building or to a building, but you need to be able to move around in that building, go to the toilet, for example, visit the other side of the building in a safe way. And we noticed that a lot of efforts were taken to organize everything as to accessibility. There was a slope, for example, provided, which was a good thing, but it was a bit wet because it had rained. So they did something about that as well. So those are all things that you might not think about in the first place, but there are practical solutions for everything, or almost everything. And another visit in our tour was a visit to the historical city brewery in the city center of Bruges. And I was quite worried about that in advance, how we would do that, how accessible it would be, but it was very accessible. It's actually an example of inclusion and accessibility to me. They have made see-through floors, for example, so it's often difficult to access the different floors in the building, but through the see-through floors you can see what happens in the other floors. And people were very friendly as well, and it's also mentioned on the website. If you want to visit the brewery with the wheelchair, please mention it in advance so we can open up the other entrance for you, which is accessible for wheelchairs and so on. All the senses were triggered during our visit as well. We got the opportunity to feel the ingredients, to smell the ingredients, to taste the first brew, and it was a very accessible restaurant as well. Dietary requirements were also taken into account, so it was a very, very pleasant surprise. And this is really a very good example of accessibility and inclusion. The streets around the brewery are maybe a bit more difficult to access, but well, the brewery in itself was great. we stayed in the domain Polderwind in Zuijenkerke. And there we really had the feeling that we had arrived in a very fancy hotel. Sometimes we are worried that we will end up in an accommodation that feels like a care institution or something that doesn't really feel like a hotel. But this was absolutely not the case. We felt like real hotel guests, and there was a restaurant and a wellness and so on. Doors could be opened automatically from the wheelchair. Bed was adjustable in height. The rooms were very spacious. There was an adjusted bathroom, lift, and so on. So this is really a hotel for people with disabilities or with reduced mobility, and it really feels like a holiday as well, which is very positive. You can also rent bikes, adjusted bikes, which is a good thing because there are a lot of beautiful bike tracks and trajectories there in the surroundings. And we did that. We rented bikes. It was a tour of 19 kilometers. And everybody was able to participate at his or her own pace. We took tandems or normal bikes. And it was a very beautiful route. We had a stop in Lissewege, for example, a typical village. The weather wasn't that nice, it rained, but we didn't really feel that because the ride itself was so nice. And we ended our road trip in the Zwin Nature Park in Knokke, and there we were also pleasantly surprised about the accessibility. We have different disabilities, different limitations, but still we could all enjoy nature. We did the track there, a paved road towards the visitors center, and you can, from the wheelchair, use binoculars to spot birds and everything. So that's great. That's all possible. At a certain point in time, we saw that there was a lot of mud at a certain point during the walk, so that wasn't really easy for people who were in an electric wheelchair. But luckily, we could rent out wombat wheelchairs with the broad wheels, so that problem was solved easily. We got a lot of clear information about the accessibility as well. The only thing that we noticed was that we had to look for parking spaces when we arrived there. That was a bit of a challenge, honestly. And in the reception center, the visitor center, we were looking for a wheelchair accessible toilet. It was there, but the signing was not really there, was missing. Or we missed it. That's also possible, of course. A while ago, I met someone who actually works there in the visitor center. And she said that that is indeed a challenge, that the signing is not really there, is not really clear indeed. But it's actually because, well, it was the architect who was responsible for the signing, and the people working in the visitor center don't really agree with what he did with that signing. So it's frustrating for them as well. So that shows that the signs are very important if you have an accessible room, an accessible space, of course, because all the facilities are there and you need to show it. In my life with disabilities, I have also noticed that there's a tension field between heritage and accessibility, and that came up during the discussion on the Gravensteen Castle in Ghent. It didn't come up at all when they renovated the Vooruit building in Ghent, the cultural center, to make it more accessible. sometimes they say that architects interpret the Flemish regulation on accessibility in a different way. Accessibility officers often take decisions about things that can or cannot happen, and architects then don't execute that decision, or there is a bit of a confusion, or there is room for interpretation, and that often leads to shortcomings regarding accessibility. Archaeology can be an obstacle, of course. If you start digging and you see that there is archaeological heritage there, then you need to stop all activities and you need to adjust your plans. The project subsidies are also an important aspect to take into account, of course. For people with a disability, it's important to really have that experience to get somewhere. The most important thing is not to see every square centimeter in a building, but just feel the atmosphere, experience what it means, what it feels like to visit heritage. And when Vooruit announced that they had made their concert hall accessible, they made a little bar there as well. Also for people with a disability. People with disability can go to the bar themselves to order a drink. I'm going to conclude with a couple of challenges that I see from my perspective. The fact that aesthetics is not always compatible with inclusion. That's a challenge in my opinion. A lot of compromise is necessary, and that asks for a lot of patience. That chain of accessibility. Sometimes there are restaurants that say, yes, you can come here with the electric wheelchair, not a problem at all. But then they forget that, you might have to visit the toilet at a certain point in time. Sometimes that's difficult. But if you communicate on that in a clear way on your website or with the people who want to come and visit, that can already make a huge difference. If you receive people with reduced mobility, if you really give them the feeling that they are welcome, that they are not bothering you, then that's already very important in making a difference. Also being focus-oriented. For example, a while ago we wanted to rent a tandem bike in Limburg in a nature domain. I can ride a tandem bike, but I need different pedals. And people there were so friendly to say, okay, we will adjust that bike. You can install your own pedals on that bike, and that allowed me to ride that bike, to ride that tandem bike, and that's always good. It's a pleasant feeling when you see that people are looking for solutions to accommodate your experience. People in Flanders are working on accessibility to a high extent. Everybody is thinking about it, and therefore it is very important that we join forces and that we share our expertise, our knowledge, so we can become even stronger as a team, and so we can make Flanders and the rest of the world even more accessible. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for listening to my story.